thinking, and on the spur of the moment decided that no, I was going to end it then.
Despite having a wife and children who you loved?
Yes. I had been trying to plan my potential suicide in the weeks leading up to this, and I was always determined to walk in front of a train. But on this night, it was just completely spur of the moment, so I just grabbed what I had to hand, kissed both of the children goodbye briefly. They were both asleep. I walked out the front door, picked up the car keys, jumped in the car and drove off. I went to the cliff tops, a very remote area, some distance from any houses, quiet and dark. And from there, I scrambled down the cliff face onto probably the most remote area of beach in the area.
And there you had the means to kill yourself?
Yes.
How close do you think you were to killing yourself when the police spotted you?
I was absolutely on the brink of doing it.
Dan Griffith was saved only by the quick thinking of his wife and by rapid action of the emergency services. He believes he could have got much earlier diagnosis and treatment if only there'd been psychological screening or assessment of troops after they returned from the war.
I think it should be a long-term process, not just for a few weeks after you return, but I think people should be screened 2 years, 3 years, 5, 10, 20 years afterwards, and it should be a continuous process. Anyone who has seen combat or had their life at risk should be screened.
So how might screening have helped you, do you think, if it had happened at the right time when you came back from Iraq?
If I'd understood what I was suffering and understood how it could be improved, how I could get better, how I could get treatment available, I might have gone and sought help quicker.
Under the last government, the Ministry of Defence was firmly opposed to the psychological screening of soldiers. Officials claimed there was some evidence it might harm them. But one of Britain's near NATO neighbours takes a very different view. We went to the Netherlands to hear how they do things there.
Looppas. 3, 2, 1. Ja, looppas, wegwezen!
I'm watching a section of 9 young and rather raw-looking Dutch soldiers being put through their paces in full battle kit with their rifles in the early stages of basic training, amid an area of heath and pine forest near Arnhem. For the last 4 years, this unit, the Air Mobile Brigade, has played a big part in its country's difficult and sometimes deadly mission in southern Afghanistan. There are 1,500 soldiers there now, and well over 20 Dutch troops have been killed since 2006. And as the Netherlands has extended its peacekeeping and troubleshooting military role in the world in recent decades, it has put an increasingly high priority on the psychological health of its forces.
They're getting better and better, but some of them will not succeed and finish this school.
So you have men dropping out at an early stage, do you?
Men dropping out every week.
Do they drop out ever for psychological reasons, because they can't take it?
Yes, mentally, physically not able to finish the practice.
The Dutch armed forces are so focused on the mental health of their troops that a so-called social medical team is embedded with each frontline battalion sent to Afghanistan. The team stays with the fighting unit before, during and after the tour of duty for up to 2 years. It could typically include a social worker, a spiritual counsellor, a doctor and a psychologist. Captain Josephine van den Berg, who's worked in such teams, says when the troops return home they're given some weeks of rest with their families, and then a structured process of psychological screening begins for the whole battalion.
After they come home, we do terugkeergesprekken. And in English it means coming back conversations. And these coming back conversations, they happen approximately 3 months after they've returned.
How intense is it, really, from the point of view of actually monitoring the soldiers and their well-being?
It is an individual conversation with every person. And the commander is responsible to send every soldier that went with him abroad, to send them to these conversations. It takes approximately 3/4 of an hour to an hour, and it is to just make an analysis. Okay, is this person well? Is he doing okay? Not only the psychological situation of the person is analysed, but also the social situation of the person is analysed. How is he doing? The social situation, that's the first instance where people can see abnormal behaviour.
The social medical teams also monitor the troops during activities and carry out further checks during the following months. There are scores of specialists working in these teams across the fighting and peacekeeping units throughout the Dutch Armed Forces. It's all run from the Mental Services Wing of a military hospital in Utrecht.
Psychological care and psychiatric care. There's a lot of accent on this topic over the last 15 years.
Lieutenant Colonel Jan Ambaum is senior clinical psychologist in charge of deployment care. And though he lacks firm statistics to prove the system works, he says there are good indications it's delivering results.
We really think that psychiatric care and the prevention and intervention in the acute phase and treatment are in a very concrete way contributing to our force.
So you think you're preventing illness, debilitating illness in the future? And
I think so.
what evidence do you have so far that you really are achieving results through this system? You really are preventing mental ill health or years of torment for your soldiers?
When we look at this population and we compare it with the Bosnia period and the Iraq period, the prevalence of PTSD in the longer term is smaller, what we see.
So as a clinical psychologist, you haven't come across evidence in this country that screening, psychological assessment of troops in that situation could actually harm them?
No, not at all. By screening them, you build up the consciousness within the troops and the attitude that something could be wrong with your behavior. I think it's a matter of being a civilized, modern, professional army to have these services.
Back here in Britain, the Conservative Party appeared to be headed down a road similar to that of the Dutch. Last year, and again in the election campaign, the Tories highlighted plans to tackle what they saw as a mental health time bomb in the forces. In April, the Defence Secretary-to-be, Dr. Liam Fox, pledged a new programme of psychological screening for troops to pick up PTSD and other combat-related mental illnesses in good time. And sure enough, the new coalition government, within days of taking power, announced what was called an effective, through-life mental health scheme for all soldiers and veterans. At the heart of it was this announcement.
A new mental health screening service within the armed forces will work to identify problems early on, and we will establish Britain's first dedicated post-traumatic stress disorder treatment programme.
So we sought further details from the Minister for Defence Personnel, Welfare and Veterans, Tory MP Andrew Robotham, a former officer in the Coldstream Guards. We went to the MOD expecting to hear from him a ringing endorsement of the new policy. But what we got was something rather different.
Now, what are you going to do about screening and assessment, psychological assessment within the armed forces, and why is that an important issue to you?
I think most expert opinion is that you should not screen people for mental health issues because, first of all, that there's no scientifically robust way that you can do that. And indeed, the downside of identifying people, suggesting that people have mental health problems, is actually, when they do not have, is actually quite immense and of great concern.
But in the MOD's new statement in May, you do talk about doing a programme of screening for the troops and the armed forces in future, psychological screening, as I understand it.
I'm not sure that's the case. Have you got the chapter and verse there?
Well, I've read the chapter and verse several times in the last few days, and it does quite...
It's not so much, sorry, just to quickly interrupt, it's not so much about there will be a programme of screening.
At that point,